Welcome back to Star Wars Shovelware, my name is Luke, and we're kicking off 2022 with a review of Epic Dumpster Bear 2 on the Nintendo Switch, a 2.5D action platformer game where you play as an angry bear on a revenge mission to take down the mega corporation that ruined his forest. Now this one was released around the middle of last year and it's about to receive its Switch port, and you're probably thinking the same thing that I was when I saw it. What is this shit and why would anybody pay for it? But don't be too hasty with your judgment here, because you may be rather surprised with what you find. So without further ado, let's get into this review and see what the game has to offer, and make sure to like and subscribe to help me out and stay up to date with all my latest content. So the story in Epic Dumpster Bear 2 is a continuation of the first title, and the game is kind enough to give us a recap where we find out that Dumpster Bear's forest was destroyed by corporate greed. He then went on to destroy their space station, but inadvertently damaged his escape rocket's instruments in the process, and then crash landed back on Earth in the middle of a toxic wasteland. Now rather conveniently, the chemicals which he landed in only served to make him stronger, and after regaining his composure he sets off to continue his revenge mission, following an oil pipeline to its source in the hopes of putting an end to the corporate menace once and for all. Now as you can probably tell from the introduction, and well just the game's concept in general, the story of Epic Dumpster Bear is all rather ridiculous. The levels themselves kind of tie into the story, with the bear's once beautiful homeland transformed into inhabitable wastelands and the mutated wildlife he faces along the way all having been impacted by the corporation's actions, but other than a few short cutscenes which play out at the end of each level, the story really doesn't play a huge part in the game. At most you can expect a little bit of humour from it if nothing else, and be prepared for another cliffhanger and for our bear to return in a future title. Now when it comes to gameplay, the developers of Epic Dumpster Bear are going for a traditional 16-bit platformer experience with this one, and so just like the good old days, things are kept relatively simple, and as you make your way through each of the game's 8 worlds, your objective in each level is to simply make your way from the start to the finish while trying not to die to enemies and other environmental hazards. Alongside a double jump manoeuvre, you're also able to wall jump a la Batman and Ninja Gaiden, and perform a dash manoeuvre which can not only be used as a movement technique, but also doubles up as an attack, with the iframes from a well-timed dash allowing you to pass through hazards unscathed. Now, for the most part the platforming is actually pretty solid. There's some really good variety with the actual platforming mechanics, with things like launcher pads, springboards and teleporters introduced, as well as bumper pads which move sections of the levels around, and while the game is rather challenging at times, requiring a reasonable degree of precision to your movements, it never feels impossible, and you do get a checkpoint about halfway through the level which alleviates some of the frustration. In addition to a variety of environmental hazards such as swinging axes, bottomless pits, deadly fan blades and rotating fireballs similar to those found in Super Mario Bros, there are also a couple of special hats that can be found in levels, allowing you to throw bombs or curling stones to destroy blocks and enemies. When it comes to the actual enemies though, there are only really 2 of them, which serve more as an obstruction rather than something to be defeated, and the only real fights that you'll actually have on your hands is with the game's boss battles, which occur on the last level of each area. Now in general the boss battles themselves are all pretty well designed. They each have clear movement patterns and attack rotations for you to learn and exploit, and once you get them down they don't prove to be too much of a challenge to defeat. Where the real issue comes in with them though is with the inconsistency of the gameplay mechanics. For instance, performing a dash attack on the boss sometimes results in you bouncing off them, but other times you'll just land right next to them and take damage, and this really started to get on my tits after a while. One of the worst bosses though, and one which I nearly lost my shit with, was this fish head boss, and this was due to the bumper pads which you need to dash into to activate not activating half of the time, and the boss's movement patterns being erratic and unpredictable. And in general, all of these things that I've mentioned serve to make the boss battles way more frustrating than they should have been. Now aside from working your way through each of the levels to complete the game, there are also several optional objectives for you to complete which open up a bunch of bonus levels for you. The first of these requires coins to unlock, which can be found scattered throughout each of the standard levels. The second are bonus levels which appear after completing the game, and these require a certain number of salmons to unlock, with additional salmons obtained by collecting collecting 3 red coins usually positioned in hard to reach locations in levels, and the final bonus levels are the X levels, which are unlocked by finding a secret exit in specific levels. In total, there are over 53 levels in the game, which include 10 Switch exclusive bonus levels, and so there's a decent amount of content for your money with this one. Now, I will admit that after playing the first couple of levels, my initial opinions of Epic Dumpster Bear weren't the most positive, and this was primarily down to how the game controlled, with my bear appearing to slide across surfaces, and I really struggled to maintain control over him to start with, and must have died about 20 or 30 times within the space of about 10 minutes. Come the end of the game though, I was actually pleasantly surprised by how much I actually enjoyed it. It plays much better than it looks, and you do get used to the platforming mechanics, and the controls are actually, as the eShop description describes them, tight and responsive, at least for the most part. I did still face issues with the wall jumping, where one minute my bear would stick to the walls like shit to a blanket, and the next moment he'd slide off them like a Teflon turd, but again these are more about issues with the consistency of the game's mechanics than anything else. Now there are other areas where the inconsistency issues become rather frustrating, such as with the distance of the dash manoeuvre, enemy hitboxes, activating these fucking bumper pads, and the few boss related mechanics that I mentioned, but in the grand scheme of things I'd say that these are generally pretty forgivable, and if nothing else, they only stand to add to the authentic 16-bit platformer experience to which the game is trying to deliver. All in all though, I felt that Epic Dumpster Bear 2 was a prime example of how you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Admitted the game's visuals make it look a bit shitty, but the platforming is actually pretty solid. There's some decent variety to its levels, and the fast-paced nature of its gameplay makes it an ideal game for speedrunning, with a good amount of skill and precision required to obtain the best times, but as an additional challenge there's also a zero-death policy enforcing levels in order for the times to actually count. So there's not an awful lot to say about the visuals and audio in this one really. From its appearance, the game looks to have been constructed out of Unity assets, and it's safe to say that it's not the most impressive looking game on the market, but I felt like the assets had been used to good effect, and the game has that kind of retro platformer aesthetic to it which ties in nicely with the gameplay. On the audio side of things, the sound effects are all rather simple, and the music consists of a pretty inconsistent track listing comprised of a Celtic rock track, another hard rock sounding track, and a couple of more retro sounding ones, but the tempo of them suits the game fine and they're enjoyable enough to play along to. So performance wise I had no real issues with the Switch port of the game. I didn't notice any slowdown with the frame rate, which was good, especially considering the speed and precision required at certain points in the game, and issues wise I've pretty much mentioned everything that I encountered in the gameplay section, and I can't really think of anything else to add to this. Overall, while it is a relatively simple game, Epic Dumpster Bear 2 is actually a pretty decent platformer. It's challenging and can be a little frustrating at times, but I was actually impressed by how well the game played. And when it comes to my own personal rating of the game, I'm going to be giving Epic Dumpster Bear 2 3 out of 5 stars. If you're looking for a platformer with more of a retro appeal, aren't bothered about flashy graphics and are up for a bit of a challenge, then I recommend checking out Epic Dumpster Bear 2 because in my opinion it's well worth the couple of quid asking price. And so that just about does it for this review of Epic Dumpster Bear 2 on the Nintendo Switch. Make sure to hit that like button if it helped you out, let me know your thoughts and opinions on the game and whether you're going to be picking it up in the comments section below, and as always, if you haven't already done so, then consider subscribing to the channel. For now though, I just want to thank you all once again for watching, and until next time, take care of yourselves and game on.